The hotel ballroom looked like something from another world. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, glowing softly like frozen stars. Long tables were covered in white cloth, and the shine of silver plates and glassware reflected everywhere. The sound of calm music floated in the air, mixed with quiet laughter and polite conversation. People dressed in expensive suits and long gowns moved easily through the room, greeting one another like old friends. This was a charity event meant for the wealthy, the kind of night where money, status, and comfort all gathered in one place. Near the walls, almost invisible, staff members moved back and forth with practiced steps. They carried trays of drinks, adjusted chairs, and responded quickly to raised hands. Among them was a young waitress wearing a simple black uniform. Her hair was neatly tied back, her shoes worn but clean. She kept her eyes low most of the time, focused on her work. To most people in the room, she was just part of the background, someone they barely noticed. She had worked events like this before. The rules were always the same. Smile politely, speak only when spoken to, move quickly but quietly, never draw attention. She followed these rules well. Her movements were calm and careful, and she knew how to pass through crowded spaces without disturbing anyone. Still, something about this night felt different to her, even if she could not explain why. At the far end of the ballroom stood a large black piano. It was polished so well that the lights above reflected clearly on its surface. It waited silently, like it was holding its breath. Every time the waitress passed that side of the room, her eyes shifted toward it for just a second longer than needed. She always looked away quickly, afraid someone might notice. As she carried a tray of glasses across the floor, she slowed slightly near the piano. Her fingers tightened around the tray. The soft music playing from the speakers filled the room, but it felt empty to her. She could almost hear something else, something deeper, like a voice waiting to be released. She had not always been a waitress. There was a time when music had filled her days, a time when her hands knew the piano keys better than they knew carrying plates. But that life felt far away now, like a story from another person's past. Life had not gone the way she once imagined, and dreams had slowly been replaced by responsibilities. A guest raised a hand, and she quickly returned to her work. She poured wine into a glass, careful not to spill a drop. The guest barely looked at her, already turning back to his conversation. She did not mind. She was used to being unseen. As the night continued, the room grew louder. People laughed more freely as the drinks flowed. Conversations overlapped, and the calm order of the early evening began to loosen. The waitress moved between tables, listening without meaning to. She heard talk of business deals, travel plans, and expensive hobbies. It all sounded distant, like noise from another life. At one table near the front, a group discussed the piano. One guest mentioned how excited they were to hear the performance later in the evening. Another spoke proudly about donating money for the entertainment. The waitress felt her chest tighten as she passed by. She knew there would be a pianist soon. Someone trained, someone expected, someone who belonged in this room. She glanced again at the piano. Her hands ached slightly, a feeling she recognized well. It happened whenever she was close to an instrument. Her fingers still remembered things her mind tried to forget. Late nights practicing, cold mornings warming her hands before playing, the sound of keys echoing in quiet rooms. She pushed the thoughts away. This was not her place anymore. Tonight, she was here to work, nothing more. In a small break area near the kitchen, she set down an empty tray and took a slow breath. Other staff members chatted quietly, sharing tired smiles. Someone complained about sore feet. Someone else joked about the guests. The waitress listened but did not join in much. Her thoughts stayed with the piano. She checked her hands, noticing the slight roughness on her fingertips. They were not the soft hands of someone who played for pleasure anymore. They were working hands now. Still, they carried memory. A supervisor passed by and reminded everyone to stay sharp. The main performance would begin later, and everything needed to go smoothly. The waitress nodded and returned to the ballroom. As she walked, she noticed how the lights reflected on the piano keys. Black and white, simple, honest, unlike the world around it, which felt heavy with rules and expectations. She imagined sitting there, just for a moment, letting the music speak instead of her. She shook her head slightly. That kind of thinking only led to pain. She had learned that long ago. A woman in a sparkling dress stopped her to ask for water. The waitress brought it quickly and received a short nod in return. No thank you. No eye contact. Just another task completed. The evening moved forward, minute by minute. Plates were cleared, glasses refilled. The air grew warmer as more people arrived. The piano remained untouched, waiting. At one point, the waitress found herself standing close to it again while waiting for instructions. No one was nearby. The music from the speakers paused briefly, and the room fell into a soft hum of voices. In that short moment, the silence around the piano felt loud. Her fingers twitched at her side. She remembered the first time she ever touched a piano. How heavy the keys felt. How surprised she was that something so simple could create so much sound. How she felt seen when she played, even if no one was watching. The memory faded as quickly as it came. A voice called out for staff assistance, and she stepped away. As she moved back into the crowd, she did not notice the way one guest watched her briefly. He saw her glance back at the piano once more before disappearing into the flow of the room. He said nothing, but the look stayed in his mind. The waitress continued working, unaware that this night, which had started like so many others, was slowly moving toward a moment that would change everything. For now, she remained what everyone believed her to be, just a waitress, quiet, invisible, waiting. The night slowly moved forward, but something underneath the surface had begun to feel unsteady. The waitress sensed it even as she continued her work. Small signs appeared one by one. A staff member whispered urgently near the stage area. A supervisor checked their watch again and again. A few guests glanced toward the piano with growing impatience. The scheduled pianist was supposed to arrive earlier to prepare. Everyone knew that. Yet the piano still stood untouched. The chair remained empty. The microphone near it had not been adjusted. For most guests, this delay was only a minor annoyance. But for the organizers, it was becoming a serious problem. The waitress was clearing glasses near the front tables when she overheard two supervisors speaking in low voices. Their words were sharp and tense. "He's not answering his phone," one of them said. "We can't delay much longer," the other replied. "People paid to be here." The waitress kept her head down, pretending not to listen, but her heart began to beat faster. She felt a strange pull in her chest, as if something invisible was tightening around her ribs. She did not know why she felt this way, but the closer the conversation came to the piano, the stronger the feeling grew. The background music from the speakers continued, but it felt wrong now, like it was only filling space. Guests noticed too. Some checked their phones. Others whispered to each other. A few laughed, clearly enjoying the drinks more than the schedule. A woman near the front waved her hand sharply. "When is the music starting?" she asked, her voice polite but firm. A staff member smiled and apologized, promising it would begin soon. The waitress watched this exchange from a distance, feeling a quiet tension stretch across the room. She returned to the service area near the kitchen to drop off empty trays. The air back there felt heavier. People spoke faster. Someone muttered about embarrassment. Someone else mentioned calling a replacement, but there was no time. The waitress stood quietly against the wall, listening, her fingers pressed together without her noticing, her mind filled with memories she had tried to bury. Sitting at a piano bench, waiting for a signal. The silence before the first note. She swallowed and took a step back. This was not her place. These thoughts were dangerous, but the feeling did not go away. A supervisor rushed past her, phone pressed tightly to their ear. Their face was pale. When they hung up, they stopped suddenly and let out a slow breath. Another staff member asked what was wrong. "He's not coming," the supervisor said quietly. "Something happened. He won't make it." The words felt like a loud sound inside the waitress's head. "What are we going to do?" someone asked. The supervisor looked around the room, eyes darting, clearly searching for answers that were not there. The guests' voices grew louder in the distance. The wait felt longer by the second. "We'll stall," the supervisor said. "Maybe extend the dinner portion." "That won't work," another staff member replied. "They're waiting for the performance." The waitress stayed silent. Her heart was beating so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. She stared at the floor, trying to slow her breathing. Then, without planning it, she spoke. "I can play." The words surprised even her. The room went quiet for a moment. Several staff members turned to look at her. The supervisor frowned slightly, unsure if they had heard correctly. "What did you say?" they asked. The waitress felt her face grow warm. She wanted to take the words back, to disappear into the wall behind her, but something deeper held her in place. "I can play the piano," she said again, more softly this time. For a moment, no one responded. Then someone let out a small laugh, not cruel, but uncomfortable. Another person shook their head slightly. "You?" one of them asked, clearly surprised. She nodded once. Yes, the supervisor looked at her carefully now, from her uniform to her tired shoes to her nervous hands. Doubt filled their eyes. This is not a practice room, the supervisor said. This is a room full of donors, I know, the waitress replied. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. I won't embarrass anyone. The supervisor hesitated. They glanced back toward the ballroom, where impatience was turning into irritation. The silence around the piano was growing heavier. Do you have any proof? Someone asked. The waitress swallowed. No, she admitted, just trust me. That answer did not inspire confidence. The supervisor rubbed their forehead. Time was slipping away. There were no better options. Finally, they sighed. If you do this, they said, you walk out there, play something short, and if it's not working, you stop immediately. The waitress nodded. Her hands were trembling now. Okay, she said. Word spread quickly among the staff. Curious looks followed her as she stepped away from the service area. Someone whispered that this was a bad idea. Someone else said they had nothing to lose. As she walked toward the piano, the room felt different, brighter, louder, heavier. Guests noticed the movement. Some assumed she was cleaning. Others frowned, annoyed by the interruption. She stopped beside the piano. Standing that close, it felt larger than she remembered. The polished surface reflected her image back at her. A waitress, not a performer. A few quiet laughs came from a nearby table. Is this part of the program? Someone whispered. The supervisor cleared their throat and spoke into the microphone. There has been an unexpected change this evening, they said carefully. We ask for your patience. The words did little to calm the room. The waitress reached for the piano bench. Her hands shook as she adjusted it. She could feel eyes on her from every direction now, judging, questioning, doubting. She sat down slowly. The noise in the room did not stop. Conversations continued. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed loudly. She placed her hands above the keys and froze. Fear rushed through her all at once. What was she doing? This was a mistake. She did not belong here. She should stand up, apologize, and return to carrying trays. Her fingers hovered, unsure. Then she remembered why she loved music in the first place. Not for applause, not for approval, but for truth, for the way it said things she could never speak. She took a deep breath. The room was still noisy. When she pressed the first key, a single note rang out, clear, strong. A few heads turned. She played another note, then another, slowly, carefully. The sound cut through the chatter like light through fog. People began to notice. Conversations softened. Some stopped completely. A few guests leaned forward in their chairs without realizing it. The waitress closed her eyes. Her hands moved with purpose now. Muscle memory returned, guiding her fingers where fear could not. The piano responded to her touch like an old friend. The room grew quieter with every measure. By the time she reached the middle of the piece, the ballroom had changed. No laughter, no whispers, only music. The waitress did not see the faces watching her. She did not see the surprise, the confusion, the slow shift into something else. All she knew was that for the first time in a long while, she felt whole again, and the audience, once restless and distracted, sat in silence, unaware that they were witnessing the beginning of something they would never forget. The music moved through the room like a quiet wave. It did not rush. It did not try to impress. It simply existed, steady and honest. The waitress played as if no one else was there, even though the room was now filled with eyes locked on her hands. At first, the guests did not know how to react. Some sat frozen, unsure if they were allowed to enjoy this moment. Others glanced around, confused by their own stillness. This was not what they expected when they arrived in polished shoes and expensive clothes. This was not part of the plan. A man near the center of the room slowly lowered his glass to the table. The sound it made felt too loud, and he winced slightly. He leaned back in his chair, listening more closely now. Across from him, a woman who had been scrolling through her phone stopped and placed it face down without thinking. The waitress's shoulders relaxed as the piece continued. Her fear faded with every note. Her breathing slowed. The piano no longer felt heavy or unfamiliar. It felt like home. She shifted gently on the bench, adjusting her posture, her fingers moving with quiet confidence. The music grew richer, fuller. It carried emotion that words could not hold. Sadness, hope, longing, and strength flowed together, each sound layered carefully over the next. Somewhere in the room, someone cleared their throat softly. Another person wiped their eyes quickly, hoping no one would notice. A couple at the back leaned closer together, hands touching on the table between them. The staff stood frozen near the walls. Trays hung forgotten at their sides. A few exchanged looks of disbelief. This was not supposed to happen, and yet none of them wanted it to stop. The supervisor watched from near the microphone. Their earlier stress replaced by something else entirely. Relief, yes, but also awe. They had taken a risk out of desperation, and now they were afraid to blink. The waitress opened her eyes for a brief moment. She saw faces turned toward her, expressions she did not expect. There was no laughter now, no judgment, only attention. Real attention. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with emotion. She looked back down at the keys and let the feeling guide her. The music softened, slowing slightly, as if taking a breath. The room followed. People leaned in without realizing it, afraid to miss even a single note. In that moment, time felt different. The long tables, the shining lights, the expensive clothes all faded into the background. There was only the piano and the sound it made. The waitress remembered why she had stopped playing. Life had become complicated. Money had become tight. Responsibilities had piled up. There was no room left for dreams that did not pay rent or put food on the table. But sitting there now, she felt something awaken inside her. A quiet reminder of who she had been before the world told her to be practical. Before fear had convinced her to be small. She pressed the keys with more confidence, allowing the music to rise again. The sound filled the high ceiling, reaching even the farthest corners of the ballroom. A guest near the back closed their eyes completely. Another rested their chin in their hand, listening like they were hearing a story they somehow already knew. The waitress's fingers moved faster now, not rushed, but alive. Each note landed exactly where it needed to be. There was no show, no exaggeration, just truth. The room was completely silent except for the piano. Even the staff near the kitchen doors had stopped moving. Someone leaned against the wall, holding their breath. Someone else pressed a hand to their chest without realizing it. As the piece reached its most emotional part, the waitress felt tears sting her eyes. She did not fight them. She let them come. They blurred her vision, but her hands did not falter. This music was not just sound. It was her story. The years she had hidden. The nights she cried quietly. The strength it took to keep going when no one was watching. The audience felt it, even if they could not explain why. A man known for speaking loudly sat completely still, his mouth slightly open. A woman who had arrived late and annoyed now stood at the edge of the room, unable to pull herself away. The piano seemed to breathe with her, responding to every shift in emotion. Soft when she needed comfort, strong when she needed courage. She reached the final section of the piece. The music slowed again, becoming gentle, almost fragile. Each note hung in the air longer than the last. No one moved. No one dared. When the final note was played, it did not disappear right away. It lingered, floating through the room like a memory refusing to fade. The waitress kept her hands on the keys. Her head bowed slightly. She waited. The silence that followed was deep and complete. Not the awkward kind. Not the kind filled with confusion. This silence was full, heavy with feeling. Seconds passed. She slowly lifted her hands from the piano and rested them in her lap. Her heart was racing again, but this time it felt different, softer, brighter. She looked up. Every face in the room was turned toward her. No one clapped, not yet. They were still processing what had just happened, still trying to understand how someone they had ignored minutes ago had reached them so deeply. The waitress stood slowly, unsure what to do next. Had she done enough? Had she done too much? For a brief moment, she considered walking away quietly, returning to her work as if none of this had happened. Then a single clap broke the silence, just one. It came from somewhere near the back of the room. Another followed, then another. Soon, the applause spread, growing louder, stronger, until it filled the ballroom. People rose from their chairs without planning to. The sound of clapping echoed against the walls, warm and powerful. The waitress stood frozen, overwhelmed. She did not smile right away. She could barely breathe. The applause continued, and with it came something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt seen. Not as a waitress, not as background, but as a person, as an artist. She bowed her head slightly, unsure how to accept what was happening. Somewhere among the crowd, a few guests exchanged looks that said everything. This night had changed direction. What was meant to be ordinary had become something unforgettable. The supervisor finally stepped forward, clapping harder than anyone else. Their face showed a mix of pride and disbelief. The waitress stepped away from the piano, her legs shaking as she returned toward the staff area. Applause followed her path like a wave. As she reached the edge of the room, the sound slowly faded. Guests sat back down, still murmuring, still stunned. The waitress leaned against the wall, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heart was pounding, but she was smiling now. A small, quiet smile. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never return to the way it was before. The applause slowly settled, but the feeling it left behind stayed heavy in the air. The room did not return to normal right away. People shifted in their seats, whispering softly, still caught in the moment they had just shared. It was as if everyone needed time to remember where they were. The waitress remained near the wall, her back resting against it, her hands pressed together in front of her. Her heart was still racing. The noise of the applause had faded, but the echo of it stayed inside her chest. She felt exposed, like a door she had kept locked for years had suddenly been thrown open. A fellow staff member approached her slowly, eyes wide. "I didn't know you could do that," they said quietly. She gave a small shrug, unsure how to respond. Words felt too small for what she was feeling. The supervisor walked over next. Their face looked different now, softer, more respectful. "That was incredible," they said. "Truly, thank you," the waitress replied. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Before anything else could be said, a guest stepped toward them. Then another, and another. The space around her began to fill. A woman in an elegant dress smiled warmly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked. The waitress hesitated. "A long time ago," she said simply. A man standing beside the woman nodded thoughtfully. "You don't just learn that," he said. "That kind of playing comes from living." The waitress did not know how to answer. She only nodded. The supervisor gently stepped in, sensing her discomfort. "Let's give her a moment," they said, guiding the guests back toward their tables. As the room slowly returned to movement, something had changed. Conversations sounded different now, softer, more thoughtful. The piano no longer felt like decoration. It felt important. The waitress was asked to take a short break. She sat on a small chair near the service area, hands resting on her knees. Her legs still felt weak. She stared at the floor, replaying the performance in her mind, wondering if it had really happened. Across the room, several guests kept glancing in her direction. Some whispered, some smiled. One person wiped their eyes again. Even though the music had ended, the event continued, but it no longer felt rushed. People took their time. Drinks were sipped slowly. Laughter came easier. After a while, the supervisor returned. "There are people who would like to speak with you," they said carefully. "Only if you're okay with that." The waitress took a deep breath and stood. "Okay," she said. She walked back into the ballroom, no longer invisible. Heads turned as she passed. The same people who had barely noticed her before now watched her with curiosity and respect. She stopped near one of the tables where an older couple sat. The woman reached out and gently touched the waitress's hand. "Thank you," she said. "That meant more to me than you know." The waitress felt her throat tighten. "I'm glad," she replied. Another guest spoke up. "Have you ever played professionally?" She shook her head. "No, you should," the guest said without hesitation. The words landed softly but deeply. As she moved from table to table, she heard similar comments: encouragement, curiosity, admiration. Each one felt unreal. One man asked if she had recordings. Another asked if she taught lessons. Someone else mentioned a small private event they hosted regularly. The waitress listened, overwhelmed. She did not promise anything. She only thanked them. At one point, she glanced back at the piano. It looked different now, less distant, more familiar. A guest near the front cleared their throat and spoke loudly enough for others to hear. "That performance," they said, "was the reason we came tonight." Several people nodded in agreement. The supervisor smiled nervously, unsure how to respond. The waitress felt a mix of pride and fear. This attention was new. It felt good, but it also felt dangerous. She had been disappointed before. Life had taught her not to hope too much. As the evening went on, the supervisor asked if she would be willing to play one more short piece later, if the guests requested it. The waitress hesitated. Her hands ached slightly now, the way they always did after playing. "I can," she said, "but just one." When the time came, the room grew quiet again, faster than before. People were ready this time, waiting. She sat at the piano once more, her movements calmer now. She did not rush. She let the silence settle before she began. This piece was simpler, lighter. It carried warmth instead of weight. People smiled openly. Some closed their eyes again. The tension from earlier was gone. replaced by something gentle and shared. When she finished, the applause came quicker this time, mixed with soft laughter and warm voices. She stood and stepped away, feeling a strange balance inside her, pride without fear, gratitude without doubt. As the night drew closer to its end, the guests slowly began to leave. Many stopped to thank her personally. Some pressed business cards into her hand. Others simply smiled and nodded, as if words were not enough. The waitress tucked the cards into her pocket without looking at them. They felt heavy, like they carried more than paper. When the room was nearly empty, she helped clear the remaining tables. The work felt different now, lighter. The supervisor approached one last time. "You changed the whole night," they said. The waitress paused, then nodded. "I didn't plan to. Sometimes the best things aren't planned," the supervisor replied. As the lights dimmed and the piano was covered, the waitress took one last look at it. She placed her hand gently on the smooth surface. "Thank you," she whispered. Though she was not sure to whom. She left the ballroom feeling tired but full. The night air outside felt cool and quiet. She breathed deeply, letting it fill her lungs. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future. Not a perfect one, but one where music had a place again. The next morning came quietly. No applause, no bright lights, just a pale sun slipping through a small window and the sound of traffic in the distance. The waitress sat on the edge of her bed, holding her phone in both hands, staring at it like it might speak first. For a long moment, she wondered if the night before had been a dream, the kind that feels real while it lasts, but fades quickly in daylight. Her body was tired in a familiar way, but her heart felt different, lighter, awake. She stood and moved through her small room, getting ready for another work day. Everything looked the same as it always had. The same chair, the same shoes by the door, the same mirror that had seen her doubts more than her hopes. But she was not the same. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She froze. A message appeared on the screen. Then another, and another. Some were short, some were longer. All of them mentioned the same thing. The piano, the night, the way it made them feel. She sat back down slowly. One message asked if she would consider playing at a small gathering. Another asked if she had ever thought about recording her music. Someone else simply wrote, "Thank you for reminding me why music matters." Her hands shook as she read. She placed the phone beside her and covered her face with her palms. Tears came, quiet but steady, not from sadness, from relief, from release, from the feeling of being heard after so long. She stayed like that for a while, letting the moment pass through her instead of pushing it away. When she finally stood again, she made a choice, a small one, but real. She took her piano books out from the bottom of a drawer where they had been hidden for years. The pages were worn, some corners were folded, a few notes were scribbled in the margins. She ran her fingers over them gently. Later that day, she returned to work. The hotel looked the same from the outside, tall and polished. But when she walked inside, something felt different. People smiled at her. Not polite smiles, real ones. A staff member waved. Another stopped her to say how proud they felt to work beside her. The supervisor greeted her with a nod that held respect instead of urgency. "You okay?" they asked. She nodded. "Yeah, I am." That night, there was no performance, no piano waiting. She served tables like she always had, but she carried herself differently now, straighter, calmer. She noticed how guests looked at her, curious but kind. She noticed how her own reflection in the glass doors looked less tired. At the end of her shift, she stepped outside into the cool air again. This time, she did not rush home. She walked slowly, letting her thoughts settle. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. One performance did not erase years of struggle. Opportunities could fade. Promises could change. Life still needed to be paid for. But something important had shifted. She believed in herself again. In the days that followed, she said yes to one small invitation, then another. She played in quiet rooms, in living spaces filled with mismatched chairs and warm smiles. She played for people who listened closely, who sat still, who thanked her like it mattered. She kept her job for a while. Stability mattered. She did not rush. Music slowly made its way back into her life, not as a dream, but as a companion. One evening, after a small gathering, someone asked her why she stopped playing for so long. She thought for a moment. "Life got loud," she said, "and I forgot how to listen to myself." They nodded, understanding more than she expected. Weeks passed, then months. She practiced every day now, even if only for a short time. Her fingers grew stronger, her confidence steadier. The ache in her hands became familiar again. But it felt worth it. She saved money. She made careful plans. She learned how to protect her time and her heart. One afternoon, she stood once more in the same hotel ballroom. This time, she was not wearing a uniform. The room was quieter than before. Smaller audience, softer lights. She sat at the piano, took a breath, and played. No surprise this time. No shock. Just music. She did not look for applause. She did not need it. She had found something better. Purpose. When she finished, the room was quiet again. That same deep silence. The kind that means something real has passed through. She smiled to herself. Later that night, as she walked home, she thought about the waitress she used to be. The one who stayed quiet. The one who believed her place was in the background. She did not feel ashamed of that version of herself. She felt grateful. That version had survived. And now, she was ready to live. The piano had always been waiting. So had she.